What's the oldest source you have telling you the moon split? The written source.
I don't know. I just saw some.
I will tell you where you get it from. The first person that we have whose writing survives. If there were others, we don't have their writings. Ibn Ishaq would mention the moon split, but there's a problem. The Sirah of Ibn Ishaq, Sirah Rasulullah, we don't have many copies of it. What we have is Ibn Hisham. Ibn Hisham, now, Ibn Ishaq wrote around 750 AD, if that dating is right. See, this is all assuming the later Muslim sources, your sources that were written 200 years after when Muhammad supposedly died, they're accurate.
Muslims acknowledge that Jesus performed many miracles, healing the sick, raising the dead, and even controlling nature. But there is one miracle they claim Jesus never performed, while Muhammad did, splitting the moon. This is considered proof of Muhammad's superiority over Jesus. But did Muhammad really split the moon? If this was a great event that happened in the sky, why didn't the world record it? Where is the historical evidence? Or is this just a myth that emerged hundreds of years after Muhammad? Let's break down this claim.
So let's assume they're accurate. Supposedly, Ibn Ishaq wrote his Sirah, his biography of Muhammad, around 750 AD. But then, in the 9th century, around 830 AD, notice this is supposedly 200 years after your prophet died, Ibn Hisham took Ibn Ishaq's Sirah and he edited it. He removed stuff he didn't like. He removed stuff that made Muhammad look bad, and he removed what he thought was weak stuff. So the oldest source we have is nearly 200 years after your prophet died, that the moon was split during the time of your prophet in Mecca. So now, what source do you have? Because supposedly, Muhammad claimed to be a prophet around the year 610 AD. And he remained in Mecca for 13 years. So we go 610, 623. What written source do you have from around that time, okay, that says the moon was split?
I thought that there was one Muslims who have been showing it left, right, and center.
Yeah, you got it. So you're basing your entire life, your life and afterlife, akhirah, on sources that are so unreliable, full of contradictions, and written hundreds of years after your prophet supposedly lived. And you're willing to gamble your life? If you die today, my friend, right now, you die today. You're basing your akhirah, the afterlife, on these sources that are so embarrassing. You're embarrassed. You even said you read stuff you wish it wasn't there. And you don't know. You may die today. I may die today. It's not a joke.
Then how do Muslims explain the moon words?
Some Muslims may cite Sirah ibn Ishaq as evidence that Muhammad split the moon. However, if we examine this claim more closely, we find serious issues with this source. Sirah ibn Ishaq was only written around 750 AD, more than 100 years after Muhammad's death in 632 AD. This means that there is no contemporary written record from Muhammad's time to support this claim. If this event truly happened and was as significant as claimed, why is there no 7th century document recording it? Another major issue is that Ibn Ishaq's original manuscript no longer exists. What we have today is merely the version edited and filtered by Ibn Hisham, who lived more than 200 years after Muhammad, around 833 AD. Ibn Hisham himself admitted that he removed many parts of Ibn Ishaq's Sirah that he deemed unreliable. This means we are not only dealing with a late source, but also with a text that has been selectively altered based on Ibn Hisham's personal judgment. If Ibn Ishaq's original text is lost and all that remains is an edited version, how can we trust its authenticity? Furthermore, there is no written evidence from Muhammad's time supporting the claim that the moon was actually split. If such a miraculous event truly occurred, historians and astronomers from different civilizations should have recorded it. Yet the reality is that not a single source from the Romans, Persians, Chinese, or Indians mentions this extraordinary phenomenon. The only evidence comes from Islamic oral traditions, which were not written down until more than a century later.
What moon verse? That moon verse is a sign. What sign? Is it the sign of what Muhammad did or a sign of the end? Finish the entire chapter, man.
Oh, so it's a sign of the end?
That's what many Muslim scholars say. I don't believe anything in the Quran, so it doesn't matter to me. But how do you know chapter 54:1 is not about the splitting of the moon? How do you know that some Muslims saw that ayah and created a miracle to go with that ayah?
Yeah, because there are hadiths, that's why I think people say...
I know. The hadiths were written when? In the time of Muhammad? So let me ask you the question again. The hadith
Yeah.
that says that he split the moon with his finger like a sword. He did his finger. Shit, man, that's one powerful finger. Same finger where water came out of from his fingers. Okay, let's go that hadith. How do you know those hadiths that were written to say Muhammad split the moon were not made up to explain chapter 54 verse 1? In other words, they saw in 54 verse 1 it says the moon was split, so they made up a story to make it like Muhammad split it. How do you know? What proof do you have that's not a made up story?
Yeah, if I had any historical proof, then it would have been much stronger.
That's what I'm trying to say. How come the world at that time, we don't have any catalog of the moon splitting at that time? Can you stop with the prophecies? They prove nothing but that your prophet is a false prophet. Because
No,
even
but Allah said, I am Wahid, you know.
okay, what does Wahid mean? What is Wahid? He's one what?
One means everything one, that's it.
So you mean he only has one attribute? He doesn't have multiple attributes? Sifat?
No, not about attributes.
You just said one means everything's one. So what does one mean? You just contradict yourself. If everything's one, that means he only has one name, one attribute.
He is one in essence and he is one in person.
Show me where it says one in person.
Muslims claim that Isra wal Miraj is one of Muhammad's greatest miracles. However, upon closer examination, there are multiple issues with this claim, whether in terms of historical evidence, logic, or even the linguistic structure of the Quran itself. Let's start with Surah Al-Isra 17 verse 1, which serves as the primary basis for this story. Exalted is he who took his servant by night from Al-Masjid Al-Haram to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, whose surroundings we have blessed to show him some of our signs. Indeed, he is the hearing, the seeing. Here, something intriguing emerges. Allah speaks using the plural form, we, barakna, we have blessed. But at the end of the verse, Allah shifts back to the singular form, he, huwa. He is the hearing, the seeing. This reveals a recurring pattern in the Quran. Allah frequently uses plural pronouns, we, when describing his actions, yet insists on absolute oneness by using singular pronouns elsewhere. If Allah is truly singular in the absolute sense, why does the Quran use the plural form, which aligns more with the concept of the Trinity, where God's oneness is dynamic, one yet plural?
Where does the Quran say he's one in person?
When he speaks, he does not have like different persons.
You sure? He speaks of himself in the third person we, and then he speaks of himself as I, then he speaks of himself in he. In the same verse, he goes from one pronoun to another. He's confused here. Can I show you?
Sometimes he wants to be majestic.
Okay, so you're saying that being plural is more majestic than being singular. Good job.
Like we, you know.
Okay, but notice what you said. He speaks in the plural because he wants to be majestic. So you just admit plural is more majestic and greater than singular. Okay, now let's go back with this chapter 17 verse 1. Here's where I want to confuse, because Allah is all over the place. It says, glory be to him, glorified be he, who took his servant by night from Masjid al-Haram, the inviolable mosque, to Masjid al-Aqsa, the farthest mosque, whose precincts we blessed, so we might show him some of our signs. So who's speaking and saying, glory be to him, glorified be he?
Of course, Allah is speaking.
Allah is speaking about himself. So Allah is saying to himself, glory be to him who's me, who took his servant, who's my servant, so that we might show him some of our signs. So Allah's praising himself?
Yeah.
And he's worshiping himself?
He's praising himself.
Yeah, and that's worship. When I say subhanallah, that's worship, right? Ibadah, right?
Yes.
So Allah just did ibadah. Allah just did ibadah. He worshipped himself because he said to himself, glory be to him. That's ibadah, that's worship. So Allah's worshiping himself? Is that what you just told us?
Look, I am not as intelligent as you. You are gonna get me stuck.
No, I'm not getting you stuck. Allah's getting you stuck. Muhammad's getting you stuck because you won't leave this false religion. Jesus will never get you stuck. Jesus will save you from being stuck because he loves you.
Surah Al-Isra 17 verse 1 states, glorified be he who took his servant by night from Al-Masjid Al-Haram to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. The crucial question here is, who is saying Subhana in this verse? A Muslim might respond, Allah is speaking and glorifying himself. However, Sam Shamoun would then ask, is Allah glorifying or worshiping himself? This presents a significant theological problem. The word Subhana originates from a root associated with glorification and worship, ibadah. In Islamic theology, only creation worships Allah, while Allah does not worship anyone. If Allah Himself is saying Subhana to glorify Himself, then this implies that Allah is worshipping Allah. But how can Allah worship Himself? This contradicts the absolute concept of Islamic monotheism, Tawheed. If this verse was written by a human about Allah, then the use of Subhana makes sense. But if it is claimed to be the direct speech of Allah, Islam must address this contradiction. If Allah is speaking to Himself, then Allah is worshipping Allah, which means He is not absolutely one. If it is not Allah speaking, then who is speaking in the Qur'an? Ultimately, this verse supports the argument that the Qur'an cannot be entirely the direct speech of Allah because it contains linguistic indications of a human perspective. Furthermore, it exposes a theological inconsistency within Islam's concept of absolute oneness, Tawheed. In contrast, the Bible presents Jesus being glorified in relation to the Father and the Holy Spirit, demonstrating a consistent relational dynamic within the Trinity. However, in Islam, Allah, who is supposed to be a singular entity, seems to speak as though another party is glorifying Him.